Welcome to the Gain Service Academy Admission Podcast. In these episodes, we will explore all things related to gaining a coveted appointment to the Air Force Academy, Naval Academy, and West Point. And here are your hosts, Rob Kirkland and Trish Penrod. Hi, everyone. Lieutenant Colonel Rob Kirkland, and I'm here with my partner in crime, Captain Trish Penrod. How you doing, Trish?
Great, sir. How are you today?
Good. Did you survive the hurricane in Florida?
I did. It came for us, but we made it out unscathed. Came really close, though. We got really lucky.
Yeah. So you didn't quite get to where you were at, but we were concerned about you, and I'm glad that you're safe and sound. And even in the middle of the hurricane, you were looking at what we were going to do for this podcast and what information we were going to put out. Yes?
That's right. And I'm really excited to talk about the ROTC and JROTC nomination today.
Yeah. And so this really was spurred by a number of our people that we work with who have brought this question up about this nomination process through the ROTC and junior ROTC. And, after getting a number of inquiries, we decided that we should put out a podcast, and then we'll publish a blog from this podcast. But there's really not one place that has like all of this consolidated information together. And this is really kind of what we love to do at, in this podcast, is really give you things that you can't find elsewhere, or just kind of in the shadows, or not really explained very well, and kind of just give it to you, do some research for you, and just present to you what we find regarding this. So today we're going to talk about the ROTC and junior ROTC nomination process and how that works. And so we'll go into that. So let's talk about the nomination process itself. So remember that you can't get an appointment to a service academy without a nomination. And that nomination can come from a variety of places, but there's two different types. There's the congressional nominations that you get through your member of Congress. And the second major category is called service connected. And so there are 1,200 slots each year to the service academies. And out of the 1,200 slots, 75% are congressionally mandated, and the other quarter or so are service connected. So let's talk about where the service connected categories come from. This is the other 20 to 25% of slots to the academy, to these academies. First is junior ROTC and ROTC. So what is ROTC and junior ROTC? Well, our Reserve Officer Training Corps is at your colleges and universities, and that's run by active duty cadre, and they are in charge of ensuring that through a 2 to 4 year training period, that college students, upon graduation and obtaining of the bachelor degree or higher, commissioned to become second lieutenants or ensigns in the United States military.
So sir, this is a parallel program, right? Along another commissioning source alongside the service academies.
Right. So this is they produce the same product, meaning a lieutenant or an ensign, but it's at a college or university, not at a service academy. And so the majority of officers that are in the service are ROTC products, not service academy products. So that's where we get the majority of our officers for the services. And then there's the junior ROTC. So these are high schoolers, right, at high school programs across the country that learn about citizenship and leadership through a program on their high school campus. it is not it's not designed to be a recruiting tool to bring people into the service. It's mainly a orientation, citizenship, and leadership for those in high school who determined that they would like to have this preparation. So that's ROTC versus junior ROTC. So sometimes those are mixed up when like I was a professor of military science, Army ROTC at Claremont McKenna and then USC. And I would tell people sometimes I was an ROTC instructor, and they would think I was a junior ROTC instructor in high school. And I had to tell them, well, the junior ROTC instructors are normally retirees who are in high school teaching. I'm in a college program on active duty, getting candidates and cadets ready for service as the second lieutenant or ensign in the military. So
that's a really big difference.
Yeah, I know. And so it's, big difference between the two. But again, the ROTC, junior ROTC, interestingly enough, is managed usually by the same command. So like for Army ROTC, it's managed by Cadet Command. That's ROTC and junior ROTC, even though the programs are separate. Second is a presidential nomination, and it is children of career military. So we have a blog post on that, and I believe we're probably going to do a future podcast episode on the presidential nomination. But that is mainly children of career military, whether that's active duty, military, retired military, or Guard and Reserve. Third is the slots for enlisted airmen, soldiers, sailors, or Marines. There's slots for active duty personnel that are serving full time, and then there's a separate category for Reserve and National Guard that are part time, and there's a category for that. We should note that the prep schoolers for each academy has a preparatory school. Those who come directly from high school into the prep school can qualify through the Guard and Reserve numbers. If you had someone who's coming from active duty to the prep school and stays on active duty, then they would qualify under the active duty category for a service-connected nomination. And then finally, the final two are children of Medal of Honor recipients, and then children of deceased, disabled, that's 100% disabled, POW or MIA. And then there's a few non-service connected nominations that are mainly for the Vice President of the United States, the superintendent of the various service academies, and some of the territories in like Puerto Rico, the American Guam and Samoa, the Virgin Islands, things like that. Those are the non-service connected presidential, vice president, or superintendent. So with that out of the way, and so that you kind of get an idea of where you get these service connected nominations from. Again, it's ROTC, junior ROTC is one category. Presidential is another category. Enlisted from the active duty or enlisted from the Guard and Reserve. Children of Medal of Honor recipients, children of deceased, disabled, POW, MIA veterans. And then the vice presidential nominations, territories of the United States, and the superintendent. So I think I've covered all of that. So talk to me about, give me a cat. Did I get everything there?
You did, sir. And I know this is a lot of information. So this is going to be on our blog post as well for JROTC, ROTC nomination. You can go look on the site, gainserviceacademyadmission.com for that.
Okay, cool.
So I think it's, you listed out so many different types of nominations there. But as you said, sir, 75% are coming from congressional members of Congress, right? So your representative or your senators. And then the other 25% are from that list, that long list that you just said. So if you think about 25% of 1,200 slots, that's really not a lot. And when we look at the JROTC, ROTC nomination, there's only 20 vacancies per year per service academy. And that's it. That's really important to take into account because this is a niche, very small nomination opportunity for students. And, it's worth noting that each unit at a minimum can submit up to 3 names per year. So let's just break down the numbers here. If we have an Army JROTC, or let's say you're applying to West Point, you're in Army JROTC. Well, there's actually 1,700 schools across the United States that have an Army JROTC program. So if you only looked at JROTC programs alone for Army, that would be over 5,000 candidates that could potentially be nominated if every single unit nominates 3 students. Now, that's not going to happen. The chances of that happening are very, very small, but it just shows you that you could be potentially competing against 5,000 people for 20 vacancies. So this is a great thing to apply for. And as we tell everyone, apply to every nomination that you're eligible for, but certainly don't rely on this. If you're in a JROTC or an ROTC unit, absolutely apply to your congressman or congresswoman at a very minimum, if not your senators as well.
Right. And then when I was in ROTC at Claremont McKenna and USC, I had a lot of partnership schools, University of California schools and Cal State schools. I never put up a candidate for a nomination for one of these nominations.
Is that because they never asked for one?
Yeah, it's not. They never asked for one. I also never kind of advertised it either. And frankly, I didn't even know I could. When I was back then. So it was a lot of. I wasn't trained on this kind of thing, so I had no idea. I think if a cadet of mine in my program had come up and say, you can nominate me for West Point, I would have gone, I don't know what you're talking about. But nobody actually ever did. But, when you take a look, so for example, with Army ROTC, there's 272 programs. You can nominate 3 for every program. That's 816 people that could be nominated from an Army ROTC program. Now, is that realistic? I mean, in my brigade in ROTC, 8th Brigade, we had, I don't know how many programs, like 13 or 14 programs. I don't remember ever talking to my colleagues about this. So I don't think.
Do you think that's a geographic
problem too, I think, and I know we talked about this before the podcast today, but I think it's, this may be more prevalent like at a place like, say, a senior military college like Texas A&M or the Citadel or something like that, where they go there for a year and then they're doing ROTC and one of their reasons for going there is to reapply to a service academy. So it may be more prevalent at one of those senior military colleges. So, but obviously if you're at Texas A&M or the Citadel and, they've got 3 slots. If I'm at, Claremont McKenna, that I've never ever did this, I got 3 slots. So it's kind of skewed a little bit because, the Texas A&M, which is a huge program, has the same amount of slots to give somebody a nomination than a podunk program or, program that has, 30 cadets.
So I think it's worthwhile talking about who these nominations are physically going to. There's only 20 of them. And who's going to get this nomination? So it's probably going to go to extremely qualified candidates very early within the application cycle. So when does the application open up? In the summer before your senior year of high school. And with that being said, it's likely going to be based off of the scholar athlete leader model. So you're looking at the whole candidate score. You're trying to maximize that whole candidate score. And when we look at different nominations, some people make the assumption that, maybe this other type of nomination, the requirements aren't as high. I don't have to get as high of an SAT, ACT score. And that's just not the case. Most likely, you're going to have to be on the average, if not higher, of what congressional appointees are actually scoring. So, we're looking at high SAT, ACT scores. You want to shoot for above a 1,400 or 32 for the ACT. You probably have earned a letter, at least one letter in varsity sports and or you're a team captain. And since you are active in JROTC or ROTC, with high school, with regards to high school and junior ROTC, you're probably a leader within your company, within your unit. You've achieved that leadership level, and your senior leadership of cadre recognizes that, and they're willing to support you, and you have a good relationship with your cadre. If you're in ROTC in college, you really haven't had the time to get to that point, but realistically, you're in the first 6 months of that detachment. If you're a freshman and you're reapplying to a service academy, but your cadre have probably recognized that you're a star candidate regardless, and they're going to go out on your behalf, especially if this is an institution that is used to pushing people to service academies like those senior military colleges that you mentioned before, sir.
Yeah, no, absolutely right. So, yeah, I mean, if you only got 20, and we talked a little earlier about how many possible nominations you can have or people being submitted, clearly, the early bird gets the worm, as you might say. So, you want to get your things done early. So if the application opens up in July, you want to have almost all of your stuff done so that when you put in the nomination and that hits, when the academy evaluates you, you'll have and if you're, one of those candidates you're talking about, then you could really get an appointment through there. If you wait until, October, November, and, you get the nomination goes through, then those 20 slots may be gone by that point.
And chances are, if you are a highly qualified candidate, you may or may not already have a letter of assurance from the service academy. So that's just going to make it really easy for them to actually give you the appointment early on, because you already have the LOA. Now you have a nomination, and they're just going to say, hey, we want this person. We want to commit them to our class because they're just a really stellar candidate, and they've shown that military propensity, and they're ready for this. It's interesting, though, to look at the number of nominations of people that are being nominated under this category. For instance, the Naval Academy publishes how many students are nominated across different categories. And it's somewhere around 300 to 400 students a year for the Naval Academy alone. And as we were talking about, sir, before this, it's probably a lot more for West Point, even though West Point doesn't publish those numbers. It's probably somewhere around 500, just because there are so many more ROTC and JROTC units for people to be nominated by.
Right.
So you're looking at 300 to 500 nominees for 20 slots. You should be applying for your congressional nomination too.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to, expect to get an appointment of one of those 20 slots out of the junior ROTC category is going to be not impossible, but difficult. So Trish, go ahead and let's take West Point, for example, as just one example. And then I guess we can go through the other ones and maybe talk, because there are, maybe some nuances, but let's just walk through it here.
Yeah, really. Okay. So you're looking at a few different categories for West Point. If you're interested in this nomination, there's one form for all of the nominations, and you can get that form from the candidate portal. So realistically, you're going to have to be a candidate already before you pursue this nomination. It's not something you can do before. So you'll have a candidate login, you'll go to the portal, you'll click on this nomination form, and you'll be able to take that to your Army instructor if you're ROTC or junior ROTC, or your professor of military science if you're an ROTC student. And that person is going to fill out a bunch of criteria about you and potentially write in comments about you. So this is why you want to have them on your side and supportive of you, and you want to have shown that you've excelled throughout the program, that you have a good attitude, everything there. And there's some nuances in terms of what you can actually apply for. So if you're in Army junior ROTC, let's say, you're eligible for West Point. However, if you are a honor unit with distinction, you're also eligible to apply to the other service academies cross service. And that applies to any unit. If you are in any type of junior ROTC program and it's a unit with merit, then you can apply, you can potentially be nominated to all 3 service academies. Right. But if, let's just say you're in Civil Air Patrol or you're in Air Force junior ROTC, then you would, and it's not a unit with distinction, then you'd only be eligible to apply to the Air Force Academy.
Right. So it's important. So if you're going to say, if you're doing Army junior ROTC and you're not a unit with distinction, you've got to you're only going to be able to go through the nomination for West Point, not to the other service academies. So from what I understand from these units with distinctions, around 10 to 15% of units are honor units with distinction. And so, what happens is that they get inspected each year. The folks from their services come down, take a look at the junior ROTC unit, and then the ones that are at the top of the pecking order through the inspections get this honor unit with distinction, which again is only about 10 to 15%. So it's really not a lot of schools. And if you're in a junior ROTC program, you'll generally know if you're an honor unit with distinction.
And there's a few ways to tell too. For Army specifically, an honor unit with distinction is, you can see it because you're wearing a gold star badge on your uniform. Mm-hmm. If you're just an honor unit or below, you'll have a blue or a white star.
Right.
You can also check your unit's orders. So your unit will have orders and you can look at that and see, is this an honor unit or not?
Right. And so each of the academies have that list. And so they'll know which units are honor units with distinction and which are just units that, have done well, but don't have that type of distinction. So that's West Point. What about a Naval Academy and Air Force?
So Naval Academy and Air Force aren't quite as easy as West Point makes it. There's no way to upload the form to the portal or anything like that, but there is a form for Navy. It's called Form 1010-5. And again, this will be on our blog post, but you can mail that form or email it to the Naval Academy admissions office. It's similar to West Point in terms of they're checking off, okay, is this student in junior ROTC, or are they being nominated under the honor unit with merit category? But unlike West Point, which you can only nominate 3 students per unit to West Point, if you have an honor unit, then you're potentially eligible to send up to 6 students. Only to Navy. You can send 3 others to the Air Force Academy or West Point. Now, is that really, in the grand scheme of things, much of a difference? It's really not. If you're a Navy ROTC and you want to go to the Naval Academy, chances are, if you have a good relationship with your detachment, you're going to be able to apply for that nomination, assuming that your senior instructor or professor of naval science supports you. Mm-hmm. And then for Air Force Academy is very similar, except it's much harder to find their forms. So we will be posting a link to Form O-761, which is how you request a Air Force JROTC nomination. And each of either your aerospace science instructor, if you're in JROTC, or your professor of aerospace studies, they can all nominate up to 5 students per unit. So it's even more competitive for Air Force, right? If 5 students per unit are being nominated for those 20 vacancies.
And so same thing with the honor unit. Generally it's around 10%, 10 to 20, usually between 10 to 20 who get the distinguished unit, or for Air Force junior ROTC. So, so it's still, again, if you're an Air Force junior ROTC and you're in that distinguished, category, then you can get a nomination to West Point or the Naval Academy through that process.
So what are the takeaways here, sir?
Yeah, no, it's great. I mean, there's it's not a magic pill. Okay, it's not that's probably the biggest thing I think that I would take away from this. I mean, it's lots of interesting trivia that we have here, lots of interesting information. What's a honor unit versus a distinguished unit? Who can get a nomination where? How many nominations are there out there? All of these, categories that make your head spin. However, there's only 20 of them. All right, there's only 20, and that's for and we already laid out earlier that there's possibly thousands of people who could be nominated for these 20 slots. So the big deal, the takeaway, that the biggest takeaway I have with this is that you've got to be a strong candidate, and if you're a strong candidate that's going to win one of these, 10 or 20 appointments out of this category, it's likely that you would probably win your district or be in the top 150 of qualified alternates. I don't have the data on these 20 people, but my guess is that all of them probably are extremely competitive candidates. So, and they would get a nomination anyway, probably from their congressman, if they put in that.
And we can say firsthand from working with candidates who've actually won the nomination through this category that is absolutely the case. The few we've worked with, they would have won the congressional nomination top slot.
Yeah, they 100%. Would have won. They would have won their district, or they would have gotten into the top. They're probably into the top 150 of qualified alternates. So what I'm saying is we get a lot of letters from people who are making a big deal out of this category, who are thinking this is some sort of magic formula. And the reality is there's hardly anybody who gets the slots out of this category. So I mean, it's great you get the nom out of that because they can give almost an unlimited number of nominations, out of this category. But the reality is only 20 who get it. So, and certainly do not just apply to this particular, just don't get the nom out of this only. Don't say, I got the junior ROTC or ROTC, that's all I need. It's likely you're not going to get the appointment. You need to apply to all the categories that you can. And then, oh, by the way, regarding the top 150, the only way you can fall into the top 150 of qualified alternates is if you have a congressional nomination. If you have a service-connected nomination, you can't qualify for the category of the qualified alternates of the top 150. So really, it's kind of an extra category. You get a nomination, but getting the appointment's another thing.
I think it really just kind of sends the message home when you look at the Naval Academy, for instance. So there, in the past years, there have been over 300 students competing for 20 slots. Mm-hmm. Whereas if you're in your congressional district, you're 10 students competing for one slot. I like the odds of that much higher, much better.
What's the, I'm trying to think, what is that? 300, I've got to get my calculator out. 20 divided by 313 is 6%. So that's 6% versus 10%. And then we do West Point. That's 4%. So yeah, I mean, the odds are not in your favor with this as much, and so, but again, it's a category. You certainly, if you qualify, you certainly should throw in your name into that hat. You may get it. As one of my instructors when I was a master's student at the University of Pittsburgh, the great Dr. Donald Goldstein said, "You can't cry if you don't apply."
That's great advice.
God rest Dr. Goldstein. So, by the way, he ran the Air Force ROTC program at Pitt, University of Pittsburgh, and then went to become an instructor in the GISPIA, the Graduate School of Public and International Affairs. And when I was going to grad school in the Army, he was one of my instructors, but a legend there at the University of Pittsburgh. But you can't cry if you don't apply.
Excellent.
Good advice, right?
I think it's advice for Service Academy applicants in general, right? This is so many people's dream, and
yeah. And so, so do we have anything more to talk about here with this? I think we're going to give you those links, and we've got the sources. We have an interesting chart to show you with the kind of the number of possible vacancies. So we'll maybe cut that out and put it as a link to in this podcast here and on YouTube.
Yeah, and YouTube. Yeah.
Very cool. Okay.
All right, sir.
So hopefully we've satisfied those people who are interested in this category and wondering about it. And of course, as you know, I get, in the end of this thing, I get all bent out of shape, and things. So you have to forgive me on this. And hopefully I wasn't ranting too much here at the end of this podcast here.
I think truth and honesty are important, sir.
Okay. All right, Trish, until our next truth and honesty time that we're together, I will see you again on this YouTube channel and podcast. Okay?
Thanks, sir.
You've reached the end of another episode of the Gain Service Academy Admission podcast. Connect with us at gainserviceacademyadmission.com. Love this episode of the podcast? Head over to iTunes, Spotify, or whatever podcast app you listen to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. Thank you.